Okay, lesson number one: Enterprise Architecture Implementation and Concepts Review by Michaela Archaga, yours truly. Okay, my topic is to create a presentation that will give insight into bringing an architecture from concept to reality can acquire a tremendous amount of time and work. Businesses are constantly seeking for methods to speed up the process. And everything makes sense. After all, time is indeed money. Hence, to assist things along, here is the approach or methods for accelerating the execution of enterprise design. For my reference on this report, the third edition, An Introduction to Enterprise Architecture, by Scott A. Bernard. Okay, we all know that enterprise architecture address and comprehend business of difficulties, both current and future. Hence, technically, it acts as a blueprint for a commercial firm containing information such as a map of IT assets, the structures and operations of the company, and of course, the business processes. An enterprise architecture technique is similar to the usual manner that architects are taught for designing and developing a business structure and operation. So there are some things that must be done in a certain order for the design to be effective and commercial venture to be correctly developed. Okay, so the adoption of a enterprise architecture comprehensive implementation methodology is one of the keys to success in enterprise architecture and business quality assurance. It also helps to get a program started and then the guides DEA documentation efforts. So one of the first steps in developing an EA program is to build an enterprise architecture methodology which compels the company to think through, okay, the following critical concerns such as which parts of the business will the enterprise architecture cover or the scope. Now, what are the strategy for enterprise architecture governance, such as like organizational structure? No, the many sorts of enterprise architecture documentation, or also known as artifacts. Now that this will be required to support business operations as well as resource planning and design and decision making in technology. So also can answer the procedures and strategies used to collect or create documentation. Now, what would be the documentation framework that best meets the enterprise's demands? What would be the software modeling tools, web applications, and databases required for automation approaches for documentation and future scenario modeling, and how will enterprise architecture users access and distribute the documentation, just like the repository of the EA enterprise architecture, and how frequently will EA documentation be updated. So before I proceed to the implementation methodology of enterprise architecture, these are the key terms that we must understand. So EA framework, or the enterprise architecture framework, is a structure for organizing information that defines the scope of the architecture, what the EA program will document, and the relationship of various areas of the architecture. So, we also have EA documentation, also known as artifacts. It is used to support business and technology resource planning and decision making. So, artifact is a documentation product such as text documents, system specification, application interface information, diagram, spreadsheet, briefing slides, and or video clip. Okay, now so these are the figures now of implementing EA program. So we have four phases, and each phases have a subset steps that needs to fill no in order to sustain and to get a standard EA program. Okay, we have this example 20 steps process comprise all of the main processes that would facilitate the development of a new and complete EA program. It should be emphasized that revitalizing an existing EA program would entail extra measures that may vary depending on the scenario. So, below are more extensive on the following slide are the extensive explanation of each stages in the sample EA methodology. Okay, now for phase one, we have title EA program establishment. So phase one actions are intended to kickstart the EA program. No, we have to identify key participants and convey the EA implementation plan to the executive sponsor. No, and this other stakeholders to secure buy-in and support. So this pre-documentation tasks are critical to ensuring that the EA program has clear goals and is focused and is accepted throughout the organization. Okay, the phase one has four steps only. Okay, the step one is establish the EA management program and identify a chief architect. Okay, now I would explain it na lang directly. Now, what would be the step one? No, step one is an enterprise architect is in charge of maintaining an organization's IT networks and services. So, he or she will be in charge of when we say chief architect. He or she will be in charge of managing, enhancing, and updating enterprise services such as software and hardware as an enterprise architect. So, it also should be established the EA team that consists of trained EA architects and representatives of various stakeholders. So the executive sponsor no, must provide with enough resources, no, the adequate resources such as budget, manpower, hardware, software, and facilities must be managed by the chief architect. So in other words, chief architect considered as the team manager or team leader. Okay, let's proceed. Step 2, establish an EA implementation methodology. So, the second step in the EA methodology is for the chief architect and EA team to identify all of the steps in the methodology that enterprise needs in order to create an effective EA program. Okay, so the above shown example figure EH approach can be utilized as is. It can be given as is or customized to match the specific demands of the business. Now, other public and private sector approaches might be employed. So, the important thing to remember in starting an EA or enterprise architecture is to have a detailed methodology that will guide program implementation and subsequent documentation activities, as well as reduce the risk of the EA program losing focus, effectiveness, and value. Okay, now Step 3, establish EA governance and links to other management processes. So as you can see here, now the third step is for executive sponsor and chief architect to co-develop an approach to EA governance that enables effective policy, planning, and decision making within the EA management program. So as you can see here in the figure, we have the CIO, okay, or the chief information officers, no, um okay, and then we have on the development side, implement side, and deployment side, we have a different personals on that: chief architect, architecture board, program management office, survey service management office, and such on. Okay, this approach to EA governance, or the organizational structure, that should incorporate connections to other management processes such as treasury planning, capital planning, project management, security, and workforce skill planning. So, chief information officers are the CIO there. No, as you can see here on the top, are in charge of managing internal IT systems. So, and developing and strategies to guarantee that technology offers the most value to a business. So he or she determines which initiatives proceed ahead and which do not. Okay. Okay, let's proceed to the last step of phase one: develop an EA communication plan and gain stakeholder buy in. Okay, the next step is to develop an EA communication plan that articulates the EA documentation methodology and schedule for Phase 2 and Phase 3 activities. The EA communication plan should be written in plain language to gain stakeholder buy in from non technical executives, line of business managers, support staff, and other potential end users of EA documentation. Okay, the communication plan, no, it should include statements about the EA missions and visions, examples of how the EA will provide value to the organization, where enterprise architecture material will be accessible, no, a synthesis of the methodology utilized, and the general principle for EA development. So that's it, the last step for phase one. So let's proceed to the phase two with the title of EA framework and tool selection. Okay, as the initial set of EA documents is created on the phase one, now phase two activities begins. This begins with the selection of an enterprise architecture documentation framework that will define the scope of the architecture, guide the approaches for modeling existing views, build feature scenarios and accompanying modeling, and construct an online enterprise architecture repository that will preserve all um, EA documentation artifacts. Okay, we have one, two, three, six steps for this under the phase two. Let's proceed to step five, continuation of the phase one. Okay, step five. No, um, the first step of phase involves the selection of an EA documentation framework by the chief architect with input from the EA team and stakeholders. The framework should identify the areas of the enterprise that the EA will cover and how those areas relate. Okay, when we see EA framework, it outlines the scopes of the architecture to be constructed and provide linkages between the architecture's parts. Okay, the geometric architecture of the framework and the spaces designated for documentation reflect its breadth, of course. So, by collecting and organizing architecture information, the framework generates an abstracted collection of views of a company. So, for example, here I have here the figure. This figure, called or known as enterprise architecture cube framework. So this the level of the sample framework no, of a business enterprises. Uh, this cube framework is a hierarchical so that the multiple subs architectures now that depict the diverse functional areas may be logically connected to each other. This is one. Okay. Okay. This is accomplished by placing high level strategic goals initiative at the top. No, as you can see here, this okay. Business product services here, and data information flows in the center, and then goes on. No, and supporting system application, technology infrastructure at the bottom. So this alignment between strategy, information, and technology may also be demonstrated in this manner of framework, no, which enhancing planning and decision making. These linkages are critical in showing how the organization uses its procedure and resources to achieve its goals. Okay, okay. Let's proceed to step six. Now, identify the enterprise architecture lines of business or LOB and cross cuts and the order of their documentations. Okay, when we say line of businesses here, as you can see here, no? This second step of phase two involves identification vertical lines of businesses. Okay, when we say line of businesses, it is a discrete area of operation inside the organization. It might entail the production of certain item, the supply of services, no? Or internal administrative responsibility. Occasionally, different vertical lines of businesses are easily obvious, such as functional subunits of an organization. So as you can see here, we have manufacturing division, sales and marketing divisions, research and development division, administration and finance division. So here, yeah, the vertical components. No, and the bottom is cross-cutting component. So, nevertheless, sometimes the line of business or the segment is something that makes sense inside the enterprise architecture, but it is not established organizational boundary. Therefore, it must be recognized through collaboration with stakeholders such as vertical supply chains, mission specific skills. So, when we say cross cutting efforts are horizontal um, operations that operate in a shared operational environment that spans many line of businesses. Okay, now such as web services, knowledge warehouses, and other example of horizontal cross-code back office system application, network infrastructure, security solution, and ERP components, now such as email, document tracking, finance, and accounting, human resources. That's considered as cross-cutting components. Okay. Step 7, identify the EA components to be documented. So, okay, um, this step identify the EA components that will have to be documented in each functional area of the framework. So, EA components are the plug and play goals processes, measures, projects, data services, and IT resources in the various functional areas. So as you can see here, we have the components. Okay, have a sub-units of strategy, business information system networks. Okay, AI components are changeable or flexible codes, procedures, standards, and resources that may be used across the organization are limited to a single line of business or segment. Strategic objectives and initiative business products and services, information flows, knowledge warehouses, and data objects, information systems, software application, enterprise resource programs and websites, voice data and video networks, and supporting infrastructure such as building server rooms, wiring runs, closets, and capital equipment are example of components of um, EA. Okay, okay. For step 8 now, select documentation methods appropriate for the framework. Okay, this next step is to select the methods that will be used together and develop EA documentations or artifacts. For example, here is the following. The following are methods for modeling into six functional areas of the cube framework on the above figure no, on the example above figure. I gave five levels and three rods. Now, so as you can see here, we have here not the three threads, products and services, data information, and system applications. Okay, okay, so it provides example of activities that can be used with the cube and other frameworks. So we have here strategic level, business level, information level, services level, technology level, and vertical threads. Along each levelness, now we have different um, resources for that. Okay, the select that methods for each level. Okay, always remember that it is important to choose documentation techniques that will provide the information that is needed for resource planning and decision making. So, therefore, the chief architect should consult with EA stakeholders and the team in selecting the methods for artifact development and what type of information will be gathered. Okay, for step 9. Okay, step 9, select software application tools to support automated EA documentation. So, okay. Now, on step 9, after the framework's functional areas or the levels and the types of EA components are identified sa step 8. No, okay. The requirements for EA documentation and artifact modeling may be developed, okay, without completing step 7 and 8. So the chief architect and the A team will be unsure of which modeling methodologies they will need to support. So for example, no, if object-oriented approaches are utilized to build artifacts at the framework's information level, so an EA modeling tool that supports the unified modeling language is required. Okay, a broad EA modeling tool, multiple specialty modeling tools. We have multiple specialty modeling tools that is available na internet online. So it depends on what would be a software application or tools that can support your EA documentation and sustain. the standard of it. And we also have a general document spreadsheet and graphics programs or applications that can be acquired and used. Okay, that's it. Step 10. No. Select and establish an online EA repository for documentation. So we have also a figure here. No. Um okay, I will just proceed to explanation of it. No. The EA repository is a database and file directory where all EA documentation is archived. Okay. Okay. It is critical to make EA documentation easily accessible for use in planning and decision making. This may be performed by establishing an online EA repository to archive the documentation of EA components throughout the EA framework. So, the EA repository is a website and a database that maintains information and connections to EA tools and other EA program resources. So here is an example here. The figure here, the example figure here of how EA repository may be built. So this example is called Living Enterprise. No, it is intended to help manage documentation using the EA Cube framework above. Okay, okay, okay. That's the last step for under the phase two. Let's proceed to the phase three of EA program or EA program implementation. Okay, phase three with the title of documentation of enterprise architecture. So phase three, no, we talk about the phase three. These are the activities where the EA is really developed in the form of documentation artifacts. No, this entails examining and documenting the enterprise's present strategy, business information, services, and infrastructure. Okay, it also entails the creation of artifacts that represent short-term resource changes, as well as the formation of a set of long-term future scenarios to identify probable courses of action and resource modification that might be required in response to various of external and internal factors ng isang business enterprise. Okay, this part of EA documentation approach concludes with the creation of EA management plan, which outline the present and future perspective of the architecture and offers a transition and sequencing strategy for short and long-term modification. So we have here um, six steps to be exact under the phase three, and it's all about on how you will properly document it. Uh, um, or how will you properly um, develop and use the documentation of EA. Okay. We have step 11, the continuous of our implementation methodology. Okay, step 11, evaluate existing business and technology documentation for use in TEA. Okay, okay. On step 11, this is the first phase of phase 3. No? It is the start of genuine EA documentation operation. So previous actions determine what would be documented. Yeah, sa phase 1, sa phase 2, no? And how it could be, how it would be documented and who would conduct the documentation. So, what is presently in phase 3 naman, we're talking about what is presently being discussed is the current perspective of EA components documented by identifying what the EA components are at each level of the framework. So, and then we'll use existing and new artifacts to document the EA components that presently exist. So this task is similar to conducting a inventory or an inventory, sorry, of the components such as the strategic goals, business services, metrics, data services, and IT resources that currently exist in the firm and mapping them to existing documentation. Okay, let's proceed to step 12. Step 12 is document current views of existing EA components in all framework areas. Okay, okay. These documents are organized by levels of the framework and stored in a that was established in step 10. Okay. Now, all in all, to summarize this step 12, this phase this step 12 is all about creating new artifacts to complete the documentation of all current components. So at each level of the framework, the present architecture compromises the EA components that currently exist inside the company. So this is referred to as the as-is viewpoint no, ng isang business enterprise. So the present view of the EA is used to generate a baseline inventory of existing resources and activities that is documented in a consistent manner with the feature view of the enterprise architecture, allowing analysts to discover performance gaps between feature goals and current capabilities. Okay? Okay, in step 13, develop several feature business and technology operating scenarios. Okay? Okay, prior to developing feature reviews of EA components, it is beneficial to gain a high level understanding of potential feature directions, no, that the enterprise could take depending on how it responds to internal and external influences. So, three or more feature scenarios should be optimally developed with EA and line of business stakeholders to reflect what may occur if the first one, the status quo is maintained. Second one is an optimal business technology operating environment is encountered. No, and there are various, and number three is a high threat survival situation. So there are various advantages to developing the scenario. No, the first one is the company is better equipped and structured to deal with future events and allocate resources. The second one is a set of planning and assumption are developed in each scenario that reflect what the enterprise's priorities may be if that scenario is adopted. So finally, on for the third one, feature capability planning is better coordinated rather than merely gathering separate inputs from line of business managers and technology managers. So separate inputs are known to sustain the stovepipe na capabilities. Okay? Step 4, identify feature planning assumptions for each feature scenario. Okay? Now, each feature scenario in the form of a tale, it illustrates a prospective business or technology operational environment that the firm may pursue or face. No? The essential features of each feature scenario are examined in this stage to determine what is the vital to the company and what changes must occur for the scenario to become a reality. So these fundamental features for the sake of the EA form the planning assumption which may then be grouped together and to indicate changes in each of the framework's functional domains. So the scenario and planning assumption were built with stakeholder buy-in, so which will aid when feature adjustment are adopted. Okay, the stuff 15. It is scenarios, program inputs, and schedule updates to drive documentation and of feature components in all frameworks area. Yeah. Okay. Okay. One will say this step involves a recommendation of changes to EA components in the near term. No, probably 1 to 2 years, and the longer term is at least 3 to 5 years. So now, by doing in this manner, the modifications are better coordinated and in line with the enterprise strategic goal. No, of course. Future views of EA components should be created using the same artifact documentation and modeling methodologies that were used to create the present views. Okay, this make it easier to recognize the changes in each of the EA frameworks functional levels, which aids in planning and decision makings. Okay, now the future architecture documents outlines the new or change EA components required by the company to bridge a performance gap or support a new strategic, intuitive initiative, operational necessity, or technological solution rather. Okay. Step 16. This might be the last of the phase 3. Okay. Develop an EA management plan to sequence plan changes in the EA. So, okay. This is the final step. Is the development of an age. Okay. This plan serve. Okay. The EA managed plan defines when we say EA management plan. It defines the EA program and documentation strategy. So always be reminded of that. The EA management plan includes also the description of the architecture's present and future perspective, as well as sequencing strategy for managing the transition to the future business technology operating environment. So, um, when we say management plan, it is also a live document that is required to reap the benefits of enterprise architecture. No? That is significant in planning and management problems. So, especially if IT resources supporting no important business operations now that are being replaced or updated. That's the essence of step 16. Okay, we're here on the last phase now of enterprise or of implementation of enterprise architecture. So in the phase 4, with use and maintain the EA program or the enterprise architecture. Though, so this has a step composed of 4 step on. Now, so this phase 4 is continuing series of activities that encourages all stakeholders to use EA information and sets an annual cycle for updates. So, in this phase, sorry, this is where the EA program's value is recognized as it supports enterprise wide planning no? And decision making. So this value is maintained by continuous modification to the architecture's current and feature perspective and view. So, the upkeep ng isang EA repository, no, as well as the upkeep of all associated software license for modeling and archiving is nandito din dapat sa phase 4. Okay. Okay, for continue. Okay, for continue. Step 17. Use EA information for resource planning and decision making. So upon the completion of phase 2, the current and future views of the architecture are stored in the repository and are ready to be used by the enterprise to support planning and decision making. Okay. Now, for example, on this is if one of the participants in planning meeting wanted to demonstrate the need for improvements in information exchange within a specific line of business, no, a documentation on the current and potential future views of the information flow could be called up from the repository and projected at the meeting. So we all know what is a repository. um, GitHub is one of the example of repositories. So all the versions there might be updated, no, might be viewed, no, might be leaked. Okay. So this together with information about related business services, supports, applications, and networks may be usefully referenced. So when graphics and text are given to everyone at the meeting, the time it takes to express concept is greatly decreased. No. Okay, this can lead to more fruitful discussion and informed conclusion since lahat kayong nasa meeting is may kanya-kanya ng version. May hawak na yun ng version, updated version ng EA documentations or the EA program. Okay, step 18, regularly update current or the feature views of EA components. So, the information in the EA repository is always be mindful na the information in the EA repository is only useful for planning and decision making if it is complete and correct. So of course, as a result, it is critical to keep current and future views of EA components, no, in all sections of the framework up to date on a frequent basis. Also, it is beneficial to e-information consumers. No, if changes are made on regular basis, possibly, pwede na, ano natin, apparently dapat nga, twice a year siya dapat. Okay, no, twice a year or more, no, kasi, again, EA programs and documentations, artifacts are changeable and flexible. It depends what would be the business enterprise needed na to become success so that it will be success. It is also critical to maintain version controls between updates so that I think it is more important to maintain version control between updates so that all users of the EA information are aware, no, that they are undertaking planning and decision making activities using the same data. So, uh, because what it is intended for future EA perspective will ultimately become the present architecture. Lahat ng sinulat niyo, lahat ng ginawa niyo for future na the possible future perspectives no in EA program will become eventually as a present architecture, at least some of it. Okay, it should be acknowledged that EA upgrades are continual and never-ending processes. No, future EA plans will evolve as an organization develops and evolves, of course. Imagine a scenario in which the company no longer requires adjustment not in future capabilities and resources. If this occurs, of course, the EA program shifts its attention from establishing the AI to managing A, the EA and ensuring that it is continue to add value to the organization. That what is the purpose of EA program? Okay, the EA. Okay, step 19. Okay, maintain the EA repository and modeling capabilities. So the chief architecture and the EA team must keep the EA repository and support applications tools up to date in terms of license and functionality. Now the needs for archiving and modeling should be assessed on an annual basis. Now, and new products should be examined on a regular basis to ensure that the EA team has the necessary application support capabilities. Now, the team should be on the lookout for new enhancements in tool functionality that may be used to be enterprise benefits. So, software purchases and license renewal should be included, no, in the yearly EA program budget. Okay. Step 20, which is the last step, now to implement EA. Release yearly updates to the EA management plan. Okay, the chief architecture must keep EA stakeholders up to date on the status of the enterprise architecture now on a regular basis. So this is accomplished by the yearly publication of an updated EA management plan, which explains changes made to the EA present and feature perspective throughout the previous year. Now, the message should include a transition and sequencing strategy for the um, changes that are expected in the future year, of course. So, furthermore, no, the continuous benefit of the EA must be highlighted by citing examples of how enterprise architecture documentation aided in planning and decision making, reduced duplicative capabilities, save money, enhance alignment, and boosted communication. So that's it. That's the in order to create a um, successful EA program, you know, and a standard enterprise architecture for business enterprise. These are the 20 steps that can be used. No, okay, can be used. So, in summary of concept, no, in summary, this topics provides a detailed approach for the execution of an EA program and the accompanying documentation task. So the four stages and 20 steps of the sample EA approach are adapted so that they may be applied in a variety of public and private sector companies. Okay? So, balikan natin. So, phase 1 activities includes establishing the EA program, identifying a chief architect to lead the program, developing the EA governance capability to run the EA program in a way to that uh, it will integrate with other IT management process and issuing communication plan to gain stakeholder buy-in and supporting. So, purpose naman ng phase 2 is to choose an EA framework that specifies the scope of the architecture, the EA components that will compromise the architecture in each functional area, and software application or tools to automate the documentation of EA components. So kapag sa phase 3 naman, it involves the actual documenting of the architecture present and future perspective as well as the creation of an EA management plan that describe how the architecture will evolve over time. Now, so the final phase for task involves using the EA throughout the company to assist planning and decision making as well as performing frequent updates to maintain EA current and adding value. Okay, so all in all, I've learned that no, all throughout ng research ko on this, pagbasa ko on this and my understanding on this, no, um, EA program or the implementation of EA, I've learned that EA is the only discipline that examines system holistically now while also providing a strategy and commercial perspective for business enterprises. So it has been defined as both a management process and analysis, not design approach that assist businesses with business and technology planning, such as resource management and decision making. So, the following objectives ng EA management program uh, is all described. No, were all described like strategy alignment, uniform policy, decision support, and resource development. So that's it. Now, thank you for listening. Okay, that's how the